Grey clouds hung over the small cemetery, casting a soft glow on the mourners gathered to bid farewell to William Parker. Friends, family and neighbors had come to honor the kind, principled man who'd impacted the lives of so many in their quiet town. For Jake Parker, William was more than just a respected figure. He was a beloved grandfather who'd shared wisdom and warmth throughout Jake's life. Jake felt the weight of the loss deeply, fighting back tears as he stood by the casket. At Jake's side, Max, William's faithful golden retriever, sat solemnly. Max had rarely left William's side and now seemed subdued by the sorrow. But there was something strange in Max's behavior. He seemed fixated on the casket, his eyes unwavering. Jake noticed but assumed Max was confused by the day's sad atmosphere, but when the minister began his eulogy, Max broke free, darting toward the casket with startling force. The golden retriever clawed at the wood, his nails scratching and chipping, as if driven by a purpose. Jake and others tried to pull Max away, but before they could, the dog's scratching caused part of the casket to splinter. The crowd gasped as something small and crumpled fell to the ground. Jake bent down, his hands slightly trembling as he picked up the aged envelope, its paper brittle and yellowed. The front bore no names or addresses, only the faint trace of a broken wax seal. Turning it over in his hands, Jake felt an odd mix of dread and curiosity. Who had hidden this in his grandfather's casket? The crowd began to whisper, watching Jake closely. He could feel their eyes on him, waiting for answers he didn't have. He looked up at the minister, then down at Max, who sat calmly now, his eyes fixed on the envelope as if he understood the weight of its secret. Slipping the envelope into his coat, Jake gave Max a reassuring pat and resolved to examine it later. After the service, as mourners slowly drifted away, a few of William's friends approached Jake, offering their condolences, yet casting curious glances toward him and Max. Jake managed polite responses, but his mind was already consumed by the mystery Max had uncovered. Once the cemetery was empty, he made his way to his car, Max following obediently at his side. Inside the quiet car, Jake pulled out the envelope, carefully breaking the seal. Inside was a single piece of paper, faded and fragile, covered in handwriting. The ink had lightened, but the words held a strange, unexpected weight. The letter addressed someone named C. Monroe, a name Jake had never heard before. Each line hinted at a secret, using phrases like, "The debt I can never repay," and "Forgiveness I no longer expect." And who was this C. Monroe? He folded the paper and replaced it in the envelope, his mind racing with questions. The grandfather he had known as an open, honest man had clearly hidden something. As he sat back, staring out the windshield at the fading daylight, Max rested his head on Jake's lap, sensing his need for comfort. For the first time, Jake felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Whatever William had kept hidden, he was now left to uncover the truth. Jake couldn't shake the mystery of the letter. Back at home, he laid the aged envelope on his desk, rereading the lines that hinted at a life his grandfather had kept hidden. The more he thought about it, the more questions crowded his mind. Who was C. Monroe, and what kind of debt had weighed on William enough to hide a letter even in his death? Determined, Jake drove to William's house the next morning. The old place was filled with remnants of a lifetime, from dusty photo frames to old books that lined the shelves. Jake searched for any signs of the past William had never shared. In the attic, he found an old trunk, the kind you'd expect to see in a movie, weathered and bound with leather straps. Inside, he uncovered family photos, letters, and a few unfamiliar objects, but nothing that pointed to a C. Monroe or the cryptic references in the letter. After a few hours, Jake was ready to give up, but an old photograph caught his eye. It showed William as a young man standing beside another man, both grinning, with 1947 C. Monroe and W. Parker scribbled on the back. Jake's pulse quickened. Here was a clue, a connection to the mysterious person in the letter. His grandfather had been much younger then, but the bond between the two men in the photo seemed strong. Encouraged, Jake took the photograph to a local historical society to dig deeper. He shared the details with the archivist, who promised to look into Monroe. That night, Jake couldn't sleep, his mind racing through possibilities. What kind of debt could bond two men for a lifetime? The following morning, Jake was startled to see an email from the archivist. She'd uncovered a newspaper clipping from the late 1940s about a car accident involving two men, William Parker and Charles Monroe. They had been childhood friends, but the article hinted at a rift between them after the accident. Rumors suggested that Charles had taken the blame for William in some incident, though the details were unclear. Jake's hands shook slightly as he read, piecing together the puzzle, but as he prepared to delve deeper, a sense of unease crept in. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. On two occasions, he noticed the same dark car parked across from his house. A man in a baseball cap appeared to be watching him, disappearing the moment Jake took notice. One evening, as he stepped out of a coffee shop, Jake felt someone brush past him, slipping a folded note into his hand before vanishing into the crowd. Jake quickly opened it to find a single line: "Some debts are best left buried." His heart pounded, and he instinctively looked around, but whoever had given him the note was already gone. Jake felt a chill as he clutched the note, the ominous words lingering in his mind. He hadn't anticipated his quiet search would attract attention, much less a threat. Yet his curiosity had become a duty, not just to uncover his grandfather's past, but to understand the story William had kept buried. This new resolve made him all the more determined to learn the truth. The next morning, Jake sought out Mr. Donovan, his grandfather's oldest friend, and perhaps the only living connection to William's secrets. Mr. Donovan welcomed Jake into his modest home, his eyes narrowing as Jake mentioned the letter. A long, tense silence filled the room before he finally spoke. "There are some things best left buried, son, but if you're determined to go down this road," he sighed, rubbing his temples, "I suppose you have the right to know." William and Charles Monroe had been closer than brothers. In their youth, they had faced a tragedy that would shape them both. A late-night accident one summer had left Charles responsible for a mistake that could have destroyed William's life. "Charles took the fall for something that wasn't all his fault," Mr. Donovan explained, his voice thick with emotion. "William couldn't face the shame or the consequences. Charles protected him, but he paid a high price, one that William could never truly repay." William had lived a life marked by kindness and honesty, yet this one secret, the sacrifice of a friend, had shaped him in ways Jake never realized. As Jake listened, he could feel a new kind of respect and sadness for William. But he was also left with a choice. He could expose everything, bringing to light the truth of William's past, or he could protect his grandfather's memory, allowing the man everyone knew and loved to rest in peace. After leaving Mr. Donovan's house, Jake wandered through town, the weight of the story pressing on him. He passed familiar spots, places he'd visited with William, small pieces of his grandfather's legacy scattered through town. Jake realized that while he yearned for answers, he also wanted to honor his grandfather's choice to keep this chapter of his life private. By the time he reached his car, he knew what he had to do. That evening, Jake returned the letter to its envelope, tucking it carefully into a small box alongside William's other keepsakes. The box now held a story that would remain his alone to bear. Though some mysteries begged to be uncovered, Jake understood that this one belonged to his grandfather, bound in love, regret, and the loyalty of a friend. He felt a quiet sense of closure, realizing that some truths, no matter how profound, were meant to be kept within family walls.